Okay, here we go. Week 4, budgeting and bookkeeping. So I was working on this today, and I think that it's very likely that those of y'all that are attending contemporaneously are maybe beyond what I'm about to talk to y'all about. So hopefully you pick up some tips and tricks and learn some new ways to do it. But I think y'all, this is a pretty intro level budgeting and bookkeeping class. Next week, we'll get deeper into taxes and sales tax stuff, which y'all will be ready for because you are beyond me on that. Okay. So today we're going to define budget and then talk about budgeting basics, starting with my favorite thing ever, goal setting, and then talk a little bit about tracking for taxes and bookkeeping. So not actual taxes, just stuff you need to track. So the first thing is the budget is what a budget is. It's just a plan for the money that's coming in and going out of whatever. So either your personal budget, your business budget, your project budget, but it's just a plan for how the money comes in, how the money comes out over the course of a set time or for specific projects. We like to say that it's for nonprofits, the budget should be your mission statement in numbers, right? And we'll get to this more in the next slide about goal setting. But, budget and the money stuff is really just the way that you support your bigger picture goals, right? It's just the numerical plan for what you want to do. And I will also say, like any plan, but particularly in the arts and particularly right now, right? We know that sometimes things can go totally to shit and it will be completely different than what you planned for. We also know that sometimes, that almost every time, the plan won't go as exactly planned, as exactly hoped for, and things will be a little bit or a lot different. You're never going to get it to be exactly what happens in real life. But it will help you guide your decisions and set your priorities and, at least have some sort of plan ready to go. So for a personal budget, I recommend as concretely as possible for about a year out, updated on a monthly basis. A project budget would only cover that specific project and will be time limited to just that specific project. Okay. Step 1, long-term goals. So the first step is creating a budget. Creating a budget for yourself is thinking into the future. These financial goals can vary wildly depending on where you are in your life and your career, and what you want to do next. I will say that today my salary is public record because I'm a public employee, so I'm gonna show you my stuff. So as an example, also because I feel very strongly that talking about finances, income, how much stuff costs in concrete terms is a tool for equity and transparency in a really good way. And that's sharing, if you have a regular job, talking to your coworkers, particularly coworkers that have the same job as you, about how much money they're making, because it should be the same-ish, right? It's our fear of being honest about money is a tool of the white supremacy and patriarchy. Okay, setting that aside. Okay. I'm also going to talk a little bit in the long-term goals in this goal setting part about where I'm at now versus where I was at when I was starting my career, 15 years ago, right? Because it's so widely different. to sort of demonstrate how priorities, goal setting, and the actual dollars change. So for me, my long-term goals now, financial long-term goals are: 1, build up savings for emergencies, save enough for a down payment on a house, pay off my car, and work towards increasing retirement contributions and savings. 13-ish years ago, so 2007, my financial goals were plan ahead to get through the summer, save, because I worked in a really seasonal industry, save for emergencies, and be able to afford health insurance pre-Obamacare, right? I did not have health insurance at that time. So those are my big picture long-term goals. You can see they're not SMART, they're not specific, they're not measurable, they're not time-bound. They will be shortly, but they're my sort of big picture 5 to 10 year financial goals, right? None of these things are going to happen this year, but they might happen in the next 5 years. So it's y'all's turn, as usual, participatory. Think back to the first class when you thought about your values, identified your values and your long-term goals, right? Because these financial goals should be the monetary version of those, right? That's how you use the money to get there. The money exists to support your values and goals, not the other way around. And I will also just say an acknowledgement that this sort of long-term thinking, particularly around finances, is extra hard right now when everything is extra uncertain and extra hard and income is so dicey. And none of us know what's going to be happening in 6 months. But it's still valuable to think about, particularly the long term, because it can help you plan and focus where you want to be as we emerge from this. But just remember to be kind and gentle to yourself if these goals fluctuate or change or the timeline gets longer, because always, but particularly right now when, I will also say that you saw my long-term financial goals on the previous slide. For me right now, on a personal note, I am luckily still fully employed. My partner is still fully employed. I have forsaken all of my long-term financial goals right now since March, and I'm only focusing on building up my emergency savings because I legitimately have no idea if I will still be employed in a month, or 6 months or a year, you know what I mean? So that's an example of the way that you set these long-term goals, but then shit happens and you shift temporarily, right? So I'll get back to the other goals later, but right now I'm focusing on the thing that will make the most sense. Okay, I'm gonna stop talking for 2 minutes and have y'all make a list of 3 to 5 longer term financial goals. That's only do the first step of the 3 that are on here. Okay, so just the same way we made the big life goals, right? Longer term goals with the financial goals. I'm interested in seeing how I would pick one of the couple that y'all wrote down or mentioned now, and I hope you'll do the rest later, and turn these into SMART goals that are time bound to sometime within the next 12 months. So SMART is specific, measurable. Achievable is an extra important one right now, right? It has to be something that's somewhat realistic, relevant, and then time bound. So for me, An example for me would be in increasing my emergency savings to be for a full year. To do that, I would need to do a couple of things. One is simple, right? It's just increase the amount of savings every month that I'm doing. But also, it's like specifically for me, it's like one of my time-bound pieces is in the next month, I'm going to go through all of my monthly subscriptions and cancel the ones that I feel like are less important to me than building up my emergency savings. So that's a pretty specific one that, you know, so this is sort of where, Jim, your raise your hourly rates would be, but I would be interested in seeing like a number or a range of what you included in there as part of the like specific and measurable. Or if it's a percentage rate. I don't know if you have a like variety of hourly rates depending on client or what you're doing. So you wouldn't want to raise them all to the same thing. So I'm gonna go ahead and give y'all 5 minutes to come up with, you know, however many SMART goals you feel are, that you have in you that are achievable, that work towards one of these bigger long-term goals. And we'll do, does 5 minutes feel right? I'll check in with you in 5 minutes. Rather than us thinking about goal setting, although I always love the goal setting. You have to do the goal setting first before you do anything else. Okay, budget templates. Oh, that got in a weird place. Okay, so once you've made these, and you know, step one is always about goal setting, right? Because all of the other stuff should be in support of the goals. So the next step to budget making is making a quick list and then later a more exhaustive list of everything you spend money on every month and how much. Here's mine. So this is, you know, break it down to whatever degree makes sense for you, right? This is just like anything else that I talk about, which is that it has to work for you, and yours is going to be different than everybody else's. So your division of stuff is going to be different than everybody else's. For me, I happen to live in a two-person household where we have a joint bank account that we pay all of our household bills from, and we both put in a set amount every month. So for me, I just have that one set bill, essentially, is how I treat it, that goes out of my personal account into a joint account, that, and then we pay rent, utilities, and like Hulu and Netflix, and we're binge watching Star Wars right now, so Disney Plus goes on there. But I have it broken down. I have the Boston Globe subscription on there to remind myself to cancel that because I do not read it enough to justify $27 a month. And for me, a lot of this is broken down further in places that are not, you know, just this big list. So things like hobbies, you know, I'm a knitter. So my hobbies are like, it's mainly yarn, but sometimes it's notions. Sometimes it's shipping. And remember that this is for you. So you can be as specific or as general. I encourage you to be as specific as possible. And if you need to break it down weekly, and there's some things that, you know, you'll pay for once a year or two. So we'll get to how to track those. But the first thing I would just do is just focus on like how much you spend on stuff in a month. I don't think I want y'all to like start writing that down, but I think like the things that come, you know, like let's all take 2 minutes and write down the things that immediately come to mind that you're regularly spending money on. Eduardo, I think one thing interesting for you to do would be to write down all of the digital the tools you're paying for, the software you're paying for, and what it does and how much it costs. And like that would help you sort of just see everything and see if you can combine or etc. And you'll also see the like under gas $20. That's, you know, maybe how much I'm spending now, but that's not how much I was spending in February. So some things will also shift unexpectedly. And I'll also say for me, these are all personal expenses. You know, right now, I don't have business expenses. So when I was freelancing, this would look very different. But the process for personal budgeting and business budgeting is essentially the same. And we'll talk about separating those two things out in a couple slides. But if it helped, you know, like one of the steps would be to sort them, right? What's personal, what's business. But if you want to just, you know, do that from the start, here's the business stuff, here's the personal stuff, because you should have it separated in your mind and on paper. All right, how y'all doing? Ready for next? Okay, oh, this is good. Don't forget, here's things not to forget in your expenses. Things like website hosting, which is probably a yearly or maybe even every other year cost. Any sponsored ads or advertising you're doing, art supplies, new tools if you need, and these are not things that are consumables, so not the clay, but the kiln, right? I mean, I know none of you are buying a kiln, but you know, not the consumable supply to make the thing, but the guitar, the amp, the soldering iron, memberships to national organizations, magazine or newspaper subscriptions, because it's pretty likely that those would be deductible for y'all as research, right? Art fair booth fees, any travel, health insurance, and then savings. Here we go. We'll talk about sort into personal and business expenses if you aren't already doing that. You know, depending on how you're already organizing your finances, you may already be doing this. This may be you're like, yeah, Molly, I'm like 4 years beyond this. But when I was freelancing, I didn't separate anything, and that is not like do as I say, not as I do, right? You should have things totally separate so that you know how your business is doing and what the income is. It's more concrete. And also for things like the Restore RI grant, all of these opportunities require you, grant and loan and small business help require you to separate the business expenses out from your personal life. So that just always helps everything. And if you just have a list, it might be as simple as like highlighting and then putting it on 2 different spreadsheets that flow together. And we're going to look at a bunch of budget templates. And then you'll notice that I had y'all think about expenses before you think about income. And that's generally best practice, is you think about the expenses first, what's going out first, before you think about what's coming in. Yeah. So then income, make a quick list of your income. For those of y'all in really seasonal, that have really seasonal work, and that looks so many different ways, right? The like doing freelance work for other jewelers because it's right before Christmas, or being a musician and knowing you're going to play a bunch of summer festivals, not this year. Those sort of things. For me, when I was working in theater, it was that I knew I would have basically no income in June, July, August. So preparing for that. If you have a really seasonal income, it would help you to do something called a cash flow budget. We'll look at them. But I think being mindful of those ebbs and flows, and that a lot of the expenses are steady as you're planning for the year, is really important. Here's my income. It's very boring and easy and cut and dry right now. It did not used to look like this. It used to look like a giant list of a bunch of different stuff. Okay. Don't forget, when you're thinking about your income, to estimate your taxes, and we'll look at this when we look at budget templates. Any side gigs, day jobs, random odd jobs, commissions, art sales, workshops, teaching fees, like any way you're getting money. If you're like, I have a friend who's really into like consigning stuff now, she's purging her collections of everything. And so she's making, some income on that. That's probably income, right? Any money that's coming in for budgeting purposes. This isn't your taxes. This is you keeping track of your ins and outs. So I would put any money coming in. Okay, so once you have these lists, this is the like biggest and most time consuming part, and for me, like the most fun, because I love spreadsheets, is creating the spreadsheet or some sort of tracking method. There are so many different budget templates, spreadsheets, tracking tools, methods. The most important thing is for y'all to figure out what works best for you, so you can account for all of the things in a way that makes sense to you. And most importantly, something that you'll maintain, right? It's like tracking your stuff for taxes. It doesn't matter if you set up a good system if you don't touch it ever again after the day that you set it up, right? It matters that it's something you actually can and will use and gives you the information that you need. So once you have this nice sort of spreadsheet looking thing, and we're going to look at a bunch of examples, and they're already up, links to the templates are already on the website. You'll want to look at those spreadsheets and kind of take a couple of steps back, right? Because all you've done now is you started with the financial goals, and then you just looked at your expenses and income as they are now. You haven't backed up yet and looked back at the long-term financial goals and the SMART goals and make sure that they're represented in your budget. So if you look at the budget and your income and your expenses now, and it doesn't track with the SMART goals or with your long-term financial goals, this is your opportunity to like really look closely and make changes, right? So things like, okay, I need to cancel my Birchbox and my Boston Globe subscriptions because they are not worth that much money to me, and they're preventing me from meeting my bigger picture financial goals. So this is, it's helpful for me to look at those things after I see the spreadsheet, where I can see everything listed out in brutal black and white numbers and see where I'm over or underspending, and see how it matches up into the SMART goals and the long-term financial goals. So you absolutely want to include in your budget spreadsheets things like savings, paying down the credit card, that sort of, estimated taxes, all of that stuff. I would also recommend, after you make the budget, tracking your spending for a month and then looking at it really honestly and critically and updating your budget based on that. I always find that for myself, some people are better at being honest with themselves about money than I am. I always find that I spend more on the stupid little stuff. Like, I was just updating my list and I was like, oh, I got 7 stars this weekend. How much did I spend on 7 stars? Oh, I go to 7 stars every Saturday after the farmer's market. Oh, and I always buy a coffee for me and my partner and a baked good. I'm spending like $60 to $100 on 7 stars every month. I don't have that written down anywhere. So, figuring out how to be honest while being gentle and forgiving with yourself about your budget is something I'm always working on, but I think is important. It's really important to be honest with yourself about the money stuff, right? Even if, yes, Jennifer.
Can I don't know if anyone has this or not, but I need to do that too, because I spend an outrageous amount like getting coffee. But it says it is costing me $1 a month, but I have QuickBooks self-employed, and I stopped spending cash and I just always use my debit card. And in QuickBooks, it lets you separate personal and business and tag everything. And then at the end of the month, you could literally click on like coffee shops or restaurants, bars, whatever, and it will show you what you spent at those places. And it was very eye-opening, like make coffee at home, So it's like, that's a good, I really like it for like $1 a month. I think you get a year at $1 a month. It was totally worth it. It helped me figure out where my money was going.
Yeah. And particularly if you're doing a lot of invoicing, something like QuickBooks is super helpful because you can do a lot of the invoicing integrated into, QuickBooks has invoicing integrated into it, and then the cash flow is there. We'll definitely be talking about QuickBooks later. So track spending for a month or look back at your bank records. A lot of financial advisors, strategists say like, only spend cash and like have an envelope, and then once you're out of cash for the week, you're out of cash for the week and move on. Like, that's great in theory, but that's not great to know where and how you're spending money. It's a good like step 1 of budgeting and controlling funding, but it's not great particularly for business stuff, right? You definitely don't want to do that for your business spending. Okay. I have 2 step 5s. So step 6, maintain and re-examine. So once you have spent your time building this, then you've zoomed back out and added the long-term and SMART goals and tracked everything for a month. You want to maintain and re-examine your budget. Touch base once a month, inputting your actual spending and income, track the discrepancy. Like everything else, like your values, like your long-term goals, all of your goals will shift over the course of your lifetime and maybe over the course of the year. My financial goals sure have shifted in the last year. And that's okay. You need to change your budget to meet the goals, right? Don't make the budget serves the goals. Do what works for you and that you will keep up with. I said this already. And be honest about your income and expenses and be kind to yourself about it, right? Don't don't budget with stars in your eyes that you're going to make it big next year unless like that really feels like it's actually for real going to happen and you can see the breadcrumbs, right? Okay, budget templates. Y'all, when I hit escape, you're seeing like my whole screen now, right? So as I show you a bunch of Excel spreadsheets, you can see them. Can you see the Excel spreadsheet? Great. Okay. So I will also say that all of these spreadsheets are already here on the website, and they're here as Excel, so you can download them and futz with them as much as you would like. So this is budget template 1, and there's a blank version, but this is a filled in version. So this is sort of what I'm talking about with cash flow, where it has everything for the actual year. Because for a lot of y'all, that's going to fluctuate. But for a lot of y'all, it will fluctuate in semi-predictable ways. Like once you're a couple years in, you know that you're not going to make any money in January, but you'll make a ton of money in December, maybe. You know, it's different for everybody. So this is really helpful because you can kind of see at the bottom, this will be net income loss. So this is like where this person is at. So this person went in the hole $1,200 in January, February, March, April, right? So it's helpful to sort of plan a year out so you can plan for the months that are going to be really great and the months that are going to be really terrible. You can look at everything and know that, like, no, you shouldn't splurge on X thing because you made a bunch of extra money this month, but you know that in 3 months you'll have a rough month, right? So this budget lists income first. So this person has a regular job with a regular paycheck, then freelance writing, and then the taxes come out of the freelance writing only. Total income, savings comes out here. So taxes and savings are already gone out of her budgeted income before she gets into the expenses. And one of the things I like here is that about this one is that it has the year and then it has whatever notes. And then there's this section, which is for tracking. So this is like how much this person actually spent. So you can go in and fill this in. And then this person has broken it down by living expenses, creative expenses, and business expenses. So this is nifty. Here we go. So expensive repair to computer happens in whatever month G is, January. So this also allows this person to, like, for their sort of more historical records to say, okay, here's what went wrong, or here's why there's a major discrepancy. So when you're budgeting for the next year, you can be like, oh, that expensive computer repair probably won't happen again this year. Or maybe I do need a budget for unexpected repairs in this technology line. You can make some decisions and notes about it. Okay. Budget template 2. So this one has a nice how-to on it, and this is more of a business focused budget, right? This has so this is the yearly budget, and then everything flows in. So this is the monthly budget, and then monthly actuals, and an overview. So you can see the budget, the actual, and the difference, full year, year to date, and the current month. And these formula all flow into each other. So this is really, this template is really, really focused on just the business stuff, not the personal stuff, but you can make them work however you need to, right? Operating revenue, non-operating revenue, expenses. Budget number 3. Okay, so this one's is a much more simplified budget for somebody who is primarily an actor, but also has some bartending income, right? So they have the side hustle. So this actor comes and has just straight up acting income. The note here says it was estimated based on the prior year's income. And then other things like workshop teaching fees, reading fees, coaching fees, all of these things that are secondary in this person's career, but help support the career as a whole, right? It's very rare that a performing artist of any kind only does performing, right? Usually they do things like these teaching or readings or coaching or private lessons, etc. And then this person has bartending income. They've budgeted taxes and savings right out before they go into the expenses. And then expenses, here we have things that are every month, things that are quarterly, things that are flexible, fun stuff, and then once a year things is how this person has ordered these. You can order them however works for you. And then there's a cash flow here that's just really, really simple. So depending on where you're at in your career or what your expenses are, something this simple might work better for you. There's all different kinds. Budget number 4. So I like this one partially because it's like design-wise, it's more pleasing because it has the white space, etc. I also really like the way that they've done this cash flow, which is cash available at the beginning of the month, which helps you know how things are, track the ups and downs, right? I also really like the way that they've worded this, cash coming into your business. So instead of income, it's just like really clear money coming in, money coming out. And you can see this was made, this template was not made by me, made for artists and creatives. And then this has broken down into general expenses, sales, marketing, operations, labor and payroll, and then other expenses. So you can kind of break it down however works for you that you want to track it. Whatever categories make the most sense. And some of that will be about your bookkeeping. Okay, let's see. Where am I going here? Okay. Project budgets. Okay, so that being said, I told you which one was my favorite. I aspire to this one. I actually set this one up for myself and then promptly never looked at it ever again. So instead, this is what I actually do. It's not great. It's not, it would not work. I mean, it would work for business expenses if you had not very many, but this is what I actually use and have maintained. And I've used this exact one spreadsheet for like, I don't know, 15 years now. And it's literally just like how much money is in my bank account right now, and then all of the coming in and coming out. So you can see that's the bad one. This is my current one, and it only goes through the end of this year right now. I've made one that was just for planning purposes for myself in case I get laid off in late November. So this is what happens if I get laid off. And so I know how much money I would need to survive. Okay. And then, so questions about those kind of budget templates. I'll also say, I also just straight up Googled budget templates to just show you, like, there's so many free budget templates. Look around, pick what works for you. The ones that I showed you in Excel, those templates are there on the Business Basics Bootcamp website already for you to download and change as much as you need to. And then there's also a bunch for, you know, free small business budget templates. There's also some available from like SCORE and probably the SBA, Center for Women in Enterprise, et cetera. Okay. Project budgets. So I did want to look at 2 project budgets. So if you ever apply for a project grant for individuals for RISCA, this is what the required budget template looks like. So again, it's time bound and topic bound just to a specific project. And again, you have a bunch of different kinds of income here, and then a bunch of different categories of expense here. So for the RISCA, you know, this is specific to a grant program. So we've grayed out the cells that are ineligible. And the way it works here is you have 2 amounts. You have the cash income, the RISCA share, and then you'll break down your expenses into what you're going to spend the RISCA money on and what you're going to spend the other income on if you have any. And a lot of grant applications will ask you for this magical in-kind number. So this is like if you're a musician and AS220 has donated rehearsal space to your band, and this is a band project, but you're getting the rehearsal space donated, right? That has an in-kind value, or performance space, that kind of stuff. Gear. Somebody volunteers to do your graphic design, that would be an in-kind expense, those sort of things. One important thing to note on grant budgets, yes, Eduardo. Oh, okay. I thought you were raising your hand, but you were blocking us off for a second. Many grant budgets have this budget detail information section. This budget detail information section is super important. Don't ever just like slough it off and say they have the numbers, right? And this is where you put these numbers into words. So things like outside administrative fees would be things like, I'm going to hire someone to make all of the copies and do all of the budgeting for this. That's an outside administrative fee. So it's a, you know, you're paying somebody. So you would put there like, I'm going to pay somebody this much money, whether it's a stipend or an hourly rate, to do these things. Or I'm putting on this theater show, so I'm going to hire 4 actors and they're each going to get paid stipends of $500. So that you would put those words there. That would go into artistic fees. So you really want to explain how you got those numbers here, because a budget for something that hasn't happened yet is just a plan, right? It's just an educated guess. So the folks, the grantors, and you know, this is the same with like loan applications, et cetera. They want to know how you made these guesses, so like, right, what the educated guesses are, how you got there. Eduardo, did you have a question? Yeah.
So when you're explaining all this, when you're actually specifically explaining in kind, is it the rate that the person would have already charged you if for said service?
Yeah. Yeah, so like if I was going to be, if you had hired me to be a consultant on your project, and I would normally charge $75 an hour for script consultations, and I was going to donate 5 hours of work, you would say, you know, X person has donated 5 hours of work. Her normal fee is $75 an hour to do this. What will I pay in Rhode Island? This is my first time. I'm an independent contractor. I recommend, I had a slide about that. To the slides. Estimate about 25% of your independent contractor income will go to taxes. If you're making like a super cushy living, it'll bump you up. But if you're not, because there'll be, you know, the self-employment tax plus your income tax bracket plus, but, and yeah. Okay.
And Molly.
Yeah.
That's all like TDI and Social Security and Medicaid. That's all comes out of there. It's everything. Okay. 25%.
Yeah, but I would also check in with an accountant because again, I can't legally give you tax advice, and I think it'll be about 25%. But
just to get an idea of, you know,
yeah.
what I'm like actually taking home. Okay.
Yeah, I used to budget 30%, and that also, but also like what worked for me was to over budget a little bit. And then you might want to look into paying quarterly taxes too. Okay, so that's risk as project grant budget. Another one that I really like is creative capitals. And again, these links to the Excel downloads are on the website. This is not an Excel download, but this link is on the website already. So this is Creative Capital, which is a large arts funder based in New York that gives mostly really, like, not that many really big grants, but they do some good, cool stuff. And they also have a lot of resources for artists, not just their grantees. So they have some explainers, but then this is really nice. Project budget for a grant if they don't give you a template to use. Something like this where it's just listing out expenses, artist fee, here's what it is, materials, here's what it is and how much, workspace, studio rent, studio assistant, internet, phone service, right? It's all of these different things. And there's a bunch of different versions or samples. I like here that this has a number of different income streams. So things like, hey, this person also got a State Arts Council grant, is applying for a foundation grant, got private donors, is selling work, right? You can look at all of these different ways to divide them. This one's interesting because this person divided it, and this is really common when you're applying for grants for larger projects where you're going to get funding from a variety of sources, is some places you have confirmed income, like income that you know is coming for sure. You've already received notification, you already have the cash in hand. Pending is like stuff that's in process, you don't have the cash in hand yet, but you know you're going to get it. And then projected is the stuff that you're relatively certain you're going to get, but there's no confirmation. So things like selling work after you've done it, like you think you're going to be able to sell the work for this much money, but like maybe somebody won't buy it. So that's a nice way to break it down on a grant application for a project budget. Yeah, anyway, these are like nice and simple. They don't, for grant proposals specifically, like it just matters that you get everything on there. It doesn't have to be a really complicated looking spreadsheet. You need to be able to read it and understand it. That's the most important part of all of these budgets. But when you're applying for a grant, you need to be able to read it and understand it, but you also need to know that the grant panel, who may not know you and may not know your specific art form well, can also read it and understand it. Yeah, so there's a whole bunch. There's like 5 or 6 different project budget templates here that are really helpful. Okay. We're back. Okay, so we talked about QuickBooks a little bit. Oh yeah, Sunlight Tax by Hannah Cole is an amazing, she is the tax preparer that I recommend, even though she's not based in Rhode Island. I recommend her because she is an artist. She's a painter that does a lot of gallery work. And then a couple months out of the year, she does taxes exclusively for folks who work in the arts. So she deeply, deeply understands and empathizes with artist taxes and is also legitimately an expert. She went back to school for it. She's an enrolled agent, which means she has a certification through the IRS to be doing income taxes. She really, really knows what she's talking about. She's wonderful. She would not be great for things like sales tax because she's not based in Rhode Island, and that's so specific to where you are. But she also, like, she even is doing like Facebook Live videos that are helpful with some quick tips and tricks. But she also has a bunch of online workshops, etc. And she usually comes to Rhode Island once a year and does a couple hour, 2-hour taxes for artists workshop for us. I'm assuming we'll have her out this year, but I'm assuming it will also be virtual. So not actually have her physically here this year. So if that happens, it'll be on Riska's social media pages. It's free. She's wonderful. Anyway, online budgeting tools. So there's a zillion of these, right? I would say for y'all, because y'all are running small businesses, to rely on bookkeeping software rather than just something that's designed for like a human with a 40-hour-a-week job for budgeting, which these mostly are. So these would work for me, but I have no weird business income, right? I just have a regular paycheck. If you do go with an online budgeting tool, I would make sure it flows, it has some sort of connection to, can be connected to whatever you use for bookkeeping. And I don't have a online budgeting tool that I recommend or use. You saw my really great spreadsheet. Bookkeeping, there's a ton of bookkeeping software out there, and it keeps getting better and cheaper and more improvisational, flexible is the word I'm looking for. So like QuickBooks used to just have QuickBooks Pro, and now they have QuickBooks Online and QuickBooks Self-Employed, and QuickBooks is my favorite of these, partially because I think I've talked about this in a previous class, partially because they also make tax software. So a lot of that stuff, you know, they're already making sort of the integrated tax return software, both professionally and for regular humans who are doing it online. QuickBooks is what every accountant I know uses that actually is a professional accountant or bookkeeper. So I like it. Their support is also located in my hometown, which I think I've said before. I think that's why I remember saying it before. That being said, I know a lot of arts folks use FreshBooks, which is a little bit more flexible, I guess, and is really focused on like professional services, small businesses. Wave is the only one on here that's free, to Jim's point. So all of these other ones, except a spreadsheet or a big list, which are also free, those are not names of things. Those are those are options. But Wave is the only one of those that is free. I know very little about Xero, but Sage, FreshBooks, and QuickBooks are all like pretty reputable. And then there's also doing it yourself on a spreadsheet or just a giant list. Again, whatever works for you, where you're at, and whatever you will actually use and keep up with. Okay. So as your bookkeeping, and we're shifting now to business-specific bookkeeping for your expenses. And this is, you know, a lot of these bookkeeping softwares, many of which are just online and in the cloud now. You don't have to buy like the CD-ROM in a box and licenses, which is what you did when I was doing this in 2007. will ask for these things, but if you want to do it just in a spreadsheet, particularly if that's what works for you and that's where you're at, you're going to want to track the vendor. So who you're paying or what you're paying, the date that you paid it, the amount. And then you'll want to track the specific project or line item in your budget. So why are you spending this money? What is this piece what is this expenditure going towards? And then a categorization, which will help you when you get to your taxes, writing out your expenses for your taxes. So if it's materials, if it's marketing, if it's research, if it's office, if it's travel, that sort of thing. And then for income, because you also want to track that, particularly if you have a bunch of different kinds of income, right? And this is like if somebody buys a piece of your jewelry, you'll want to track as much of this as is possible, right? So payee, whoever is giving you the money, that could be the person buying your piece of jewelry. That could be you got a $1,000 grant. It would be the grant maker, like the source of the money. The contact information for the source of the money. So if it's a grant, if you're getting a grant from RISCA, an individual artist grant from RISCA, I would probably be your contact, right? But if it's a person buying your work, you would want that person's contact info. If you're selling it through a gallery, you still, depending on how they're sending you money, right? If you get a check from the actual end buyer, you'll have this, but you'll probably just be getting a check from the gallery, right? So then it would be the gallery's contact info. However, for marketing, you want to do your best to capture who actually bought the work, because they'll be more likely to buy another of your piece in the future, right? You want to be able to add them to your mailing list and such. So that's a like non-bookkeeping, but like try and capture them. Date that the money exchanged hands. Invoice number or grant number, if there is one, there might not be. The amount, and then what it's for specifically. So if you sold a ring, you know, you'd want to say like some short description of that ring. Or if you're a person who works on technical theater, you want to say, I did electrics work for the load-in of A Christmas Carol, right? That's what the money is for. And then categorize it however works for you. It'll be different for every artist. It'll be very different for every discipline. And it should match up with your budgeting and bookkeeping, like what you want to measure, right? What things, how you want to be able to divide stuff. Okay. Before we get to stuff that you should be tracking for taxes, questions? How's everybody feeling? Awesome. Okay. Tax preparation and tracking. Here are things that you'll want to track for sure for your Schedule C. Obviously, all of the Schedule C income, even if you don't get tax paperwork for it, right? Your travel to and from jobs. This is only jobs that you do not get a W-2 on. And so this is also my background as like in the performing arts, right? So when I was getting 1099, if I drove, and I was living in Arizona, so I would drive 50 miles for a gig. That is all deductible as mileage. Any supplies, research. So depending on what your industry is, if you are buying books, going to movies, going to theater, going to a museum, depending on what your discipline is. So if you're a musician, you're going to other people's shows, you're paying admission for those shows, that is deductible on your taxes as an expense because it's research, right? Yeah, my $400 Hamilton ticket the year I went to Hamilton was just right out of my taxes. It was great. Tools that are specific to your art making. This includes software, job-specific clothing. So this is one where many tax preparers have differing interpretations of the tax code and tax law on this one. So you do whatever you feel you're most comfortable with. I would recommend that you can only deduct clothing if it's only able to be, if you cannot reasonably wear it during the rest of the time, right? So like if you're a musician and you have a favorite t-shirt that you wear to all your gigs, but you also wear it on other days, or it's something you could wear on other days, that is not tax deductible. If you need to buy steel toe boots for job sites, that is a deduction out of your expense. Like that is an expense. So there's, you know, there's some folks in the performing arts who have a more flexible interpretation of the tax law there, where they would say if you wear it on stage, it's job specific clothing. Other accountants that I know would not say that. My mom is a CPA. I once tried to convince her that a bunch of makeup that I bought should be an expense for me on my taxes, because I wasn't wearing that kind of makeup in my daily life. I bought it because I had to go to a gala because I was like, and interact with fancy donors and, you know, wear a dress and heels and all that stuff. And my mom laughed at me, of course. But there's also some pretty famous tax law, you know, and a lot of this tax law has been decided in the courts, right? It goes to the courts because the code is not cut and dry. It looks cut and dry, but it, you know, there's always some variation. But there's one that about this that some people really like, which was someone who had a job as an exotic dancer tried to write off breast implants and won that court case. So she successfully did because it was specific to her job, right? So it's interesting. Other things that you can write off are your home office and your utilities. So it's not all of your utilities, it's whatever portion is your home office. So when I was doing this, for part of the time, I was lucky enough to have a bedroom that was my home office. So I measured it and took the square footage as a portion of the square footage of my apartment and said, okay, that's my home office deduction, is that percentage of the rent, that percentage of my electric bill, that percentage of my gas bill. So you want to be tracking that. You also want to make sure that it's plausible if you get audited and they show up at your home, that it clearly looks like you only use it for your office, right? If you're using it for a bunch of other things, it probably won't pass that muster. But even if it's something like my setup now, where I just have a corner in my living room, but the only thing in that corner is office stuff, right? That would still count. It doesn't need to be a standalone room, but just like a space that is dedicated to art making or the business practices around your art making. We're going to finish early again today. Okay. Do you have questions about that kind of stuff, tracking expenses? Tape off the floor to define your own office. That's a great idea. And this is true, you know, I say home office, but this is also true for a home studio. So if you're making your art in your home, make a little spot for that you can plausibly tell an auditor that you only make your art there. Okay, best practices: scanning all your receipts, keeping track of your miles contemporaneously, so writing it down with specifics around how far you go, where you're going, what gig it's related to, when you're doing it. Keep some sort of spreadsheet or bookkeeping software and keep up with it weekly or monthly, whatever works for you, right? That's the sort of best practices, are to just keep up with it all year long, particularly if you're working in the performing arts and have a lot of like mileage and travel. And I think I've said this before in this class, but I'm pretty public about the fact that I did not do that when I was freelancing. I had a big physical folder and I had an email folder where I put all of my receipts. And then I kept a calendar. So I just had a Google Calendar that had every single one of my gigs in it, and where it was. And I had a spreadsheet with 3 pages, mileage, income, and expenses. And I would go just like get out my calendar and get out those 2 folders a couple of days right before tax time and crunch through everything. So a calendar that says where your gig is will hold up for tracking miles. It's better. There's a bunch of like apps that will do that for you now. If this is something that y'all are doing a lot, is traveling a lot for work, there's a bunch of apps that will do that for you now that do it automatically, that you can just like hit buttons when you get in your car. You can also keep a little notebook in your car, or a notes app on your phone with mileage around that. Okay, well, that's it. That was budgeting and bookkeeping 101. How do you all feel? Lingering or outstanding questions, thoughts, feelings, needs?
Do you have those spreadsheets that you showed us? We have a link to that one that you like. I'm bad at making a spreadsheet, but I like to use them.
Okay.
I just can't create it myself.
Yeah, so they're all on the Business Basics Bootcamp website, and I added them earlier today because, you know, like I'll put slides in this recording up tomorrow, but I knew that everybody was gonna, I knew that I was gonna want y'all to be able to go to these immediately. So they're in the Business Basics Bootcamp under week 4, and then it's just budget template 1, 2, 3, 4, the PGI budget template, which is also other places, and then creative capitals. So all of those are there for you. If those don't work for you, or if you can't adapt them to work for you, like feel free to mess with them as much as you need. You should make them, change them to work for you. If you just Google budget templates, you will be overwhelmed by options. Other questions, thoughts, concerns, needs? Okay, I'm trying to think. Riska doesn't have any super exciting programming coming up in the next week. If you live in Providence, the micro business grant program that City of Providence is running with LISC opens Thursday morning. There are only 23 grants available. So do that. It's businesses of 5 employees or under. So they're really actually focusing on like single member sole proprietors. Both Restore RI and business adaptation grants have money and are still giving money out. So if you have questions about that, let me know, or let Kara, I can connect you to the person in commerce if it's a question that's beyond me. Yeah, I think that's it. I'll have my office hour at 3 on Thursday. Feel free to drop in. And so our office is closed for election day, which is awesome. This is my first presidential general election since I've moved to Rhode Island. So I was pleasantly surprised to find out that we have that day off, which is Tuesday. However, we will still have this class. I will still be doing 2 hours of work that day. And everybody vote, please, if you haven't already. Okay, I think that's it. Let me know if you need anything else, have any other questions.
Thank you.
Anything I can help you with. It's nice to see you all.
You too.
Thank you, Molly.
And I'll also edit out y'all's answers about financial goal setting before I post it. So it might be posted later in the day tomorrow because that'll take some time.
Thanks. Oh, thanks for the idea, Sabrina, too. The, what was it? The spreadsheet where you clock in and out with your hours.
That's brilliant.
Oh, thank you. It's helped me because I'm still looking for a job right now. So like, it's helped me kind of create structure out of the infinite blank, structureless